So, welcome to today's episode of the Healthy and Wealthy podcast. And today I am joined by the wonderful Claire Hattrick, the Executive Menopause Coach. As a 56-year-old hailing from Hampshire, UK, she is the mum of 25-year-old identical twins. And having lost 10 years of her life to undiagnosed menopause, joint pain, and all of the works that go along with that stage of life, it was really a place where she was unable to sit, stand, walk, really function on a day-to-day. And that's what led her to writing the book Menopause: Help Before, During and After, and working specifically with women at this stage of life, both in and out of the workplace. So first of all, thank you, Claire, for joining us today.
You are very welcome, Rita. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I gave a very, very brief nutshell of 10 years in about 10 seconds. So why don't you elaborate a little bit on what you suffered with in terms of the menopause and symptoms that led you to doing this? Because most of the women listening, I think we're probably up to about 100 different symptoms that I've heard from different audience members. So what was it that really afflicted you?
So for me, and possibly my passion for getting into the menopause space, was I didn't realise that your psychological symptoms often come before we even know about it. So I was in a very happy relationship at the time, and I had, unbeknown to me, my first panic attack a year before any of my joint pain started. I was driving down the M3. I was in a car full of friends, an XC90, so there were 7 of us, and I stopped on the M3 and got out of the car. I had no idea until probably 14 years later that for me was my first panic attack. And then it was about a year after that I'd rolled onto my little finger and wedding ring finger, or so I thought, in the middle of the night. And that was my start of 10 years of menopausal joint hell. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I didn't write it down at the time, but I think within probably about 6 or 8 months, it was into my elbows. And within another eight months to a year, it was into my knees and my hips, where I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand. I felt like my hip was being dislocated. I would often crawl around on my hands and knees. I stopped leaving the house for a period of about 2.5 years. Again, unbeknown to me, thinking it was mild asthma in the middle of the night. I was having panic and anxiety attacks. And the only way I could sleep was to stand up against a door frame. So that's what's kind of projected me into many years of research. I was under 11 consultants, Lyme's disease, arthritis, fibromyalgia, to name a few. And all the consultants that were in the South and London all looked at one another and said, "We don't know what's the matter with you." I'm part now of a trial with a big London hospital and a university, and they've got access to my medical notes. And blood test 3, when I was 40, just 41, shows I had 8% estrogen left in my body. And nobody in just under 10-year span ever picked up on this.
My goodness. So obviously, for those listening who don't have a huge sort of scientific awareness of what happens during menopause, it is very natural to lose estrogen levels. This is a completely natural part of menopause. And it tends to start from around the age of sort of 35, late 30s onwards. But to be at 8% by the age of just 41, that's not usual for those listening. That's exceptionally low. So the joint pain that you described that just took over your whole body, what is the relationship between the exceptionally low estrogen and that joint pain? Could you give us a little bit of an understanding of the biological relationship between the two?
Yeah, of course, Rita. So basically, your estrogen is a really brilliant anti-inflammatory. So the minute kind of somebody turned that estrogen tap on, and my estrogen left my body, as well as progesterone, but don't laugh, I've got large levels of testosterone, which can really help with joint pain, but nobody will give me any because I've still got quite large amounts. It was that would have caused the horrendous pain that I was in. Basically, a lack of estrogen, had a massive effect on all of my joints. My ankles and my wrists weren't brilliant, but I could possibly manage those. But my knees, elbows, and hips, which kind of really leaves you quite disabled, because I couldn't pick a cup up. I would drink to the bottom of a mug with a metal straw and pick the last inch up of a cup of tea. I would get out of bed in the morning, fall onto my knees, grunting and groaning, crawl to the bathroom, pick up my electric toothbrush, use my nose to put it on, and hold two hands to clean my teeth in the morning. So as much as you say I'm pretty flawed, 25% of women will be utterly flawed with menopause, 25% will walk it relatively smoothly, and the other 50% will float somewhere in between. So my passion is, at least if we're educated, which we're not at school, we all think menopause is hot flashes and old ladies. Well, I don't think at 40, 41 I was old, and I'm the person now that is sat here rubbing my hands because I'm always cold, never had a hot flush, never had a night sweat. To the contrary, always I'm sat here now with the heating whacked up, so I feel like I'm somewhere hot.
So it's curious that you talk about, absolutely, there are sort of the more common symptoms that we are made aware of very loosely.
Yeah.
But then there are obviously all of these other symptoms that come along with it that just hit you like a ton of bricks, and you have no idea are coming. And you mentioned right at the beginning of our chat the psychological impacts. Now, at 41, you're unable to move, brush your teeth, get out of bed, and you were in a happy relationship. What effect did this have on you as a woman, as a sexually active, vibrant partner? What effect did this have from a relationship standpoint?
And sadly, the relationship ended. It wasn't necessarily down to that. There were other outside factors. But I think that and the stress, and you talk about the psychological, nobody talked to me ever about my stress levels were off the Richter scale. I talk very openly in my presentations in the workplace about the times I've been at the top of our local car park. I wouldn't say I was depressed. Clearly I was. But I had no enjoyment in life. I think friends, you don't want to be the moaner and the whinger all the time, so you make excuses not to see people. You don't want to go out, because the first thing I would do is walk into a wine bar or a cafe and think, oh my goodness, they've got plastic chairs, I won't get out of them if I sit down for an hour. And again, it would make you very anxious. I wasn't sleeping, and for me, I think we don't talk enough about the brain fog. Definitely that's something that's really hard. I think when you go, do these presentations, you talk like we just discussed, and then you go off at a tangent and you're thinking, where was I going with that conversation? I think we need to normalize that. And I did a big show last week and I did lose track, and I said, what was I talking about? And people said afterwards, it was so nice that you actually said, where was I going with that conversation? I think if we can normalize this, and women contact me in the workplace and say, I've left because I can't stand up in front of people and they're all looking at me and I have got no idea what I'm even talking about. And it's things like that. They're very psychological. It's really damaging. Women like myself that are really bubbly, outgoing and confident. I haven't been that person for possibly 13, 14 years, but I'm back, and it does get better if you've got the right toolkit. And I know obviously you're into your health and fitness, Rita. That was the one thing that kept me going, without a doubt. I don't know how I got to my local gym, and the guys would often drag me, carry me. I mean, everybody just knew I would crawl around the gym on my hands and knees for 10 years. Nobody batted an eye. I think there were people that probably thought I was drunk, or, who didn't know me, or drugged. And, you can't walk around the streets on your knees. But I did.
Mm. You used a phrase there, which was normalize. And there seems to be this very bizarre disparity and incongruence when it comes to the menopause. There's a lot of symptoms which are not normalized, and women feel ashamed, guilty, embarrassed around talking about them.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's overly normalized, that everything is just put down to, well, you're in the
Get over it.
get over it, deal with it. Every woman goes through it. So there's this bizarre kind of incongruence going on here. So when it comes to, especially in the workplace, because I know this is a field that you have a lot of experience in, what do you feel are some of the biggest barriers for women at any stage of the menopause when it comes to normalizing what they're going through with either male colleagues or maybe younger women who have no sort of understanding yet of what's going on?
Absolutely great question. And I wish more people would ask that. I think when I go in and I speak to people, I think the best thing I do, and I never realised how good I was at it, is actually telling people honestly and openly about my journey. I've done lots of presentations online, and I can see people going, and it's that light bulb moment. It's that's me. I don't want to be the work whinge. I don't want to be the whinging wife or partner. And I think it is embarrassment and it's shame. I wanted to get on with my life. I've always been one of those sad people who loves the gym ever since I was 18. I've belonged to some pretty nice health clubs. And, you know, I can't sing exercise praises enough. Whatever your bag is, whatever you do, get up and move. Because for 4 months, I gave up the gym and I couldn't get up the stairs. I lived downstairs in my lounge and slept on the sofa.
Yeah.
Which was horrendous, but I thought maybe I was doing more damage than good, but for my mental health. And again, I think if you have these conversations and you say to people, you know, women genuinely think they've got Alzheimer's and dementia. I said, I very much doubt at 39 you have. Obviously go and seek your, you know, professional medical help. But I think you've got brain fog. And when you explain to people kind of what that is and the examples, I think if you talk in real layman's terms, people don't find it as overwhelming. I think they kind of get those moments. They're like, that's exactly how I feel. My husband and I had a row on Saturday night, they tell me, and I was all togged up. I looked beautiful. I got to the door. I'm not going. I don't know what's come over me. And I think, again, for men, we can't slate the male population when the women don't understand it, but we need to educate them. It's not that women don't fancy you anymore. It's not that they don't want sex with you anymore. 83% of women suffer with vaginal dryness, and less than 7% of women will go and get help for it. I watch them in the gym in the morning, itching, scratching, adjusting themselves worse than the men. And I'm there with all my Yes Organics vaginal moisturizer, giving out samples, going, try this. But it's just women are totally unaware. We're not taught. And another comment I absolutely hate is, oh, but my mum might. But my mum had hot flushes and didn't have any symptoms similar to myself. I've been floored with menopause. My sister, she likes to tell me she's walked it. She's 2 years older than me, until I remind her how many times she's been blue lighted to hospital in an ambulance with heart palpitations in her mid-40s and doesn't sleep very well. So I've told her to take some magnesium and get exercising a bit more. And it's things like this. I say to people, I want to say it's free. Obviously, we pay water rates, but it's little things you can do to help yourself. It's lifestyle changes. HRT is not a silver bullet for everybody. I needed it in my 40s. I've had to come off it 10 months ago because for the 2 years I've just not stopped bleeding. I've had 5 endometrial scans with transvaginal scans because the endometrial lining was 5 times the safety guidelines. So I needed progesterone because I've still got a womb and ovaries. Ladies, if you're taking estrogen and you've got a womb and ovaries, you need to take progesterone. And what worries me is how uneducated our doctors are. I've had several friends that say, oh, I didn't like the progesterone, so I've stopped taking that. No, you don't. That can and possibly will lead to one of the 5 gynecological cancers. You need to protect your endometrial lining. But mine was overprotected and getting thicker and thicker, and I just kept bleeding. So much to my absolute horror, I was very lucky to be under Mid Hampshire Health, and I've got a couple of private menopause GPs that wanted to join the call. And after an hour, the general consensus was, because I was coming up to 56, somebody would fit a coil, but I had to pull it out myself. So we agreed that I would stop taking my HRT, and for 3 weeks they all rang and made sure I was all right, because I'm now living on my own. Both the twins are up in London. And yeah, here I am 10 months on, the joint pain is gone, but I am postmenopause by 15 years. Some women, postmenopause is worse than peri. For me, perimenopause was a living hell.
Okay. There's a lot of things that you mentioned there that, you know, we hear.
Sorry, I know I've gone off a tangent, but that's what, Rita.
That's what it's about. That's what it's about. And, you know, your tangent led somewhere which is, you know, very, very common for most of the women that I speak to, which is the HRT and the constant bleeding and this uneducated inability of the NHS. So this is obviously UK specific here.
Yeah.
To really look at each individual woman as a unique entity, because everybody, we talk about hormone imbalance, which is such a catch-all phrase. What does that mean? All hormone levels were completely different to the next, to the next, to the next. And it was, may I ask, your twins, girls or boys?
Girls. So
Okay.
Abby's joined the Met. She's a detective constable, and Beth is a London paramedic and has been for 5 years. But they help me with the Executive Menopause Coach.com, which we always say to anybody, add to your work intranet or your notice board. It's free. We sat in lockdown and worked for nothing for nearly 18 months putting together the website. It's very, very much aimed at men and businesses as well, because it's only a short read. It's not overly medically written. It's layman's terms, so people can relate to it. We want Joe Public to read and think, I can relate to that. We don't want another big, scientific medical book. I leave that to the doctors. But just to pick up, Rita, we are begging with the Make Menopause Matter campaign I belong to, and Menopause Mandate with all the celebs and MPs. We are begging our government to make, mandatory menopause training compulsory for GPs and doctors. HRT's individual as menopause is, you could line up 1 million women that have horrific joint pain. They might not have the anxiety. They might say, oh, I sleep like a log. Lucky you, I hear people saying. But it is a matter of I think there's about 71 symptoms. No one talks about dry nose, dry mouth. If I talk too much, you will see me grabbing for this. I look at ITV News in the evening and our lovely Mary Nightingale, who talks, and you're waiting for her to break out into a really bad coughing fit. Nobody talks about dryness. Is literally tinnitus is linked to dryness, vaginal dryness, dry eyes, dry nose. I've got friends that say, all I can taste is a metallic-y taste when I eat now. I said, yeah, lots of oral issues. Women saying that I've had horrendous, teething problems, never had bad teeth in my life. Every time I go, I've got new fillings. I'm now having bridges fitted. So that lack of estrogen, progesterone and testosterone can have colossal effects on the poor women's bodies.
Absolutely. Now, one of the interesting things in the workplace, and we sort of see women at this stage, sort of 40 to 60, let's say, that kind of 20-year gap, who have worked, how should I put it, pretty bloody damn hard to get where they are, right? And they're in a position where they've probably, and this is not universal, so forgive me if this doesn't apply to you, but for a lot of them, have had to work harder than the men for less pay, for less appreciation. They have spent an awful long time hiding their menopause symptoms or any other symptoms, whether we go back all the way to, I've just gone back to work 2 months after having a baby because I didn't want to lose my job, all the way through their life. And rightly so, there is a level of protectionism around themselves. And that can come out, and I think a lot of women will admit this, in potentially subconscious perpetuation of these cycles. Well, I want the next generation of women to suffer because I did. I want the next generation of women to have to go through all of the things that I did to get where I am. That kind of psychological cycle that we have, which is not helpful to women going through it or women who are yet to. How do we take steps towards breaking that cycle and saying, hey, it's okay that not everyone has to go through this?
Again, Rita, I think it's back to education, information. I think if we can have those open conversations in the workplace, so women can go in and I go into lots of businesses and the women say, I've got really heavy periods, I'm leaking, I work for a younger male boss, I'm embarrassed. I would have been going through perimenopause. Now, I just say to them, what have you adopted the black cardigan policy? What's that? Well, round the office, you have black cardigans. So whatever you're wearing, if you've leaked whatever, you can put that cardigan round your waist, wipe the chair with it, whatever you've got to do to get yourself into that toilet. But I'm hoping in time she would better say to her boss, oh, I'm really sorry, but I have just had a really heavy period. I need to go and sort myself out. And I say to companies, you need to have a quiet room where you've got wipes, you've got a bit of perfume, you've got a quiet space with a bit of relaxing music if you've got people having terrible anxiety. Make sure there's a water butt in there. Just give them that space, tampons, liners, a change of clothes maybe. Obviously, there's so many different, work. You might be a policeman, so you can't work from home. But I think it's just for businesses, they just need to make those reasonable adjustments and speak to their staff. And I think if we can start at the top with big organizations and then it comes down through the management, then, you know, the people take it home, the conversations are had around the dinner table. We've campaigned very hard for the schools now if they're following the RSE curriculum. So their 15, 16-year-old daughters and sons are being taught it, but there's a bloody great gap between that and 90-year-olds, you know, and that's what we're trying to do, is really normalize and get these conversations where we shouldn't have to, you know, if men can't get erections, they've got Viagra. Women are, you know, and that's on the television, every other advert. We've started to promote periods and sanitary towels and things like that. But everybody seems very reluctant to talk about menopause, and we're living longer. So women are going to be post-menopause for a lot longer than they were pre-menopause, let alone peri and menopause. You know, we are going to be post-menopause for so much longer of our life. So we need to get this conversation out so women do feel that they can say, you know, I'm really sorry, I can't come in today. Once a month, I have a horrendous migraine. I'm violently sick, and the toilet is my friend for the day. And I've got it coming out of both ends. Don't know why. I've never had diarrhea before, but now I have. I think if you can be honest, I think it's 80% of women will lie to their employer as to why they're off. That isn't constructive. It doesn't help the employer to embrace menopause and say, look, we employ 300 women. If it's happening to her, it's very likely to be happening to possibly another 50% of our staff. But we're on the very bottom of a very long ladder. I think we have a long way to go. But I think until we do, and I don't want to see my daughters, they're 25, you know, I don't want to see them, and I don't want to see anybody else have to see their mum crawling round. I used to have to call them and get them back from college to get me off the toilet. I mean, nobody should be putting on their kids like I was. I was unfortunate. I was a single mum. And so the girls have seen their mum go through a horrendous time.
What I'd like to really focus on as, I suppose, the last key point is those psychological aspects. And you talked about getting out of the car on the M3. And again, for those listening who are not in the UK, that's not a good road to get out of a car on. It's a very busy motorway. So do you feel that, because I guess it's another area of the psychological aspect that people really don't want to talk about because the word terrifies people, but it's suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
Suicidal thoughts is a huge part of those psychological panic attacks that happen and are so terrifying, and women feel highly ashamed but also scared because when we say something it makes it real. Did you ever have any thoughts like that, and if so, how did you handle them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk very openly and honestly about this, Rita, because I think if I don't, nobody else will. I can remember feeling a burden to everybody. I didn't want to be moaning to my family. I didn't want to be moaning to the girls. I didn't want to be moaning to my then partner. So I almost want to say you make everything so catastrophic in your head. You end up laying in bed at night thinking the same sentence over and over and over. How I'm still here sometimes, I never know, because if somebody upsets you, you're then thinking, oh, was it me? Was it me? Should I have? And you're reliving. And women say, that's what I do. You know, we make everything into a massive catastrophe, but it is in your head because you're not speaking to anybody. You're answering your own questions. You're putting that question out in your head. You're then having a sleepless night. It becomes too much. And the only way out is to think, well, I don't actually feel depressed, but I don't want to be here anymore. I have no enjoyment in my life. I don't want to go out. I don't want to see anybody. Women often have put on weight. I can't get into anything. I don't like what I look like. It doesn't matter how much your husband, partner or kids or work colleagues say, oh my goodness, you look lovely. You look gorgeous today. If you don't feel gorgeous, you don't feel gorgeous. It doesn't matter how many times people say, oh, I've told her she looks amazing. When you're going through this, you know, and we've got receptors all over our bodies. They're in our vagina, they're in our brains, they're in our little toes, big toes, hands. when the hormones aren't being sent to those areas anymore, that's why we get so many symptoms. And you just cannot help how you feel. I mean, I deal with a lot of women who say to me, I'm ashamed of how I speak to my staff. I have become a bully. I don't like who I am anymore. And I've dealt with quite a few people in defense, and they say to me, sometimes the only way out is to end my life, because my husband doesn't like me. He tells me openly he doesn't. My work colleagues, I know, are snarling at me, and I can't stop. It comes out of my mouth, and then I think afterwards, I shouldn't have said that. And again, you can't help it. It's not you being a nasty person, but it's having the right information in that toolkit. Go and speak to your GP, reach out to somebody like me, book a menopause coaching session. It could be the best little bit of money you've spent in your life. If I can't help you, I can signpost you to people who can. What isn't acceptable, and it's kind of become a bit of a motto with me, is suffering should not be an option.
It's amazing how these days we used to ask people, how are you? And the words would be, I'm fine. Now, how are you? Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I'm stressed. Oh, I'm busy. Suffering, and we go back to that word, normalized, has been normalized. Yeah. Whether it's psychological suffering, emotional, relationship, or physical, we kind of feel, and especially I think in the UK at this time, with an awful lot of negative weight sort of being passed around the country, there is a sense that, well, I should be suffering because everybody is. So absolutely, suffering should not be an option. I think that's fantastic. What I'd like to just touch on, sort of moving on from that before we finish up, there are different ways of going into menopause. And there's a lot of women who just naturally start going through perimenopause because of age. And there are also women who go slap bang well into the middle of it because of surgical intervention through hysterectomies. Yeah. In your experience, have you seen that those two paths into menopause are different? And if so, what are maybe the different ways of handling it from both perspectives?
Again, I'm going to go back to those words, education, information. I hear from lots of women who have sadly had a form of cancer. And what really makes me sad is before they have any surgery, nobody talks to them. They might say, oh, you're going to go into a forced menopause. And so they go, oh, all right, then that's fine. Yeah, I know I'm going to go through that one day. What they don't realize is how utterly flawed. And I've spoken to women who've had a hysterectomy or breast cancer or something one day, and within 2 or 3 days, this very happy, bubbly person is suicidal because nobody's talked to them about their options. Do we need to look at HRT? Maybe you're only 38. You're going to be like this for an awful long time. Some women do seem to be able to deal with it through exercise, through, lots of, different lifestyle changes. But for most women, our NHS, we need people to actually speak to these women and say, maybe your POI, polycystic ovarian insufficiency, these poor young ladies. And I know two who are mature women now who went through menopause at 12 and 13 years old. The horrendous surgery these women are having in their mid to late 40s. I don't even want to go into that's a podcast for another day, Rita. But I think if we can be educated, and definitely the medical world is getting on board now. Obviously, we're pushing it very hard from our campaigning. We need our celebrities to normalise it. I know, Dame Kelly Holmes, somebody as fit as she is very open. She messages me, I speak to people like that, and they are flawed. Now, you don't get much fitter and in better condition than somebody like Dame Kelly. So it doesn't matter what background you come from. I do a lot of work with refugees. That's my voluntary side that I love doing, because these women, some of them are on the run, some of them can't register with a doctor. I always say to people, always reach out to me. I will never turn anybody down, because I just think, it's giving back. I don't want to see anybody go through the 10 or 14 years of utter hell that I have. And I think if we can support each other, and even if you are a man and you can pick up a book and just read a couple of pages, go onto my website, just be a little bit informed, the world will be a kinder place when it comes to menopause. The cost of living crisis, women are saying to me, I can't afford my HRT prescription. We campaigned hard. We hoped the government would give us that for nothing. But obviously, if you have estrogen, it's 1 prescription a year. If you have progesterone, it's 2. we're getting there, but we are still a long way off from making this a normal, this is going to happen. There are possibly 70 odd symptoms. Let's educate our women. So when they go into this, they're not getting out of the car on the M3 and having a complete meltdown. And not one person asked me why I did that. And I think I loved it when you said you ask how people are. I think a lot of us, and I need an Oscar for my performance, when someone says, how are you? Go, yeah, good, thanks. I always say to people, ask again. If you're concerned about an employee, take them somewhere quiet. If you're a man and you don't feel maybe it's appropriate and you think it possibly could be menopause because you're gemmed up and you know what you're talking about and you've got a basic information, get a female member to take them to one side, say, are you all right? Because we are concerned about you. Obviously, don't dive in with, are you going through menopause? I think that will come in years to come. And I think we will better laugh and joke about it. And we do need to normalise it because we don't want to frighten our younger generation thinking it's all horrendous. But unfortunately, the people who are talking about it are people like me because our journeys have been horrendous. But I just think if our GPs are more knowledgeable, they'll give HRT as opposed to antidepressants. I've still got women that I coach and I'm fighting and battling 4 months on with GPs. Give them a mild dose of HRT derived from yam plants. It's better than these addictive painkillers, which I've taken in the past. They made me feel absolutely shocking. I can remember having an out-of-body experience one night on amitriptyline and thinking, I need the loo, but I can't move, and laying in bed and wetting myself because the drugs that they would rather give over HRT, that's the effect it had on me. I'm not a tablet taker. I'm a big lover in exercise and supplements and helping yourself.
Yeah.
But some of us, it doesn't matter how much we help ourselves. We've had a bad time of it. We don't want that to happen to anybody else.
It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Claire, and I feel like we could do many podcast episodes on various different areas of this. But thank you so much for giving us such an insight into menopause, both at home, psychologically, in the workplace, and beyond. And obviously, if you've been listening to today's episode and you want to learn anything more about what Claire does or get in touch with her, all of Claire's details will be in the podcast description. So please go and check out that website. It is an absolutely fantastic read. So that is a massive thank you to everyone at home for listening. And thank you to Claire for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Rita. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope I just hope sharing my journey helps some of your listeners as well. And thank you for all the work you do in this space as well.
Fabulous. All right. I will see you all on the next episode. Bye-bye.